The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, featuring Josh Edison and M. Dentith.
Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. In a humid, rainy Auckland, if you can hear the background noise, I am Josh Edison, and in Zhuhai, China, the spirits will move you in odd and hysterical ways. It's Associate Professor M. R. X. Dentith.
I mean, that could be the tag time to any of the Mr. Vampire films.
But it's not. It's Scrooged. For a bit of
I'm
Christmas
still thinking about
spirit.
Mr. Vampire, the
Fair
hopping vampire / ghost myth of Chinese mythology,
The
made into a
Jiangxi.
series of very bizarre films. Not bizarre in that the films themselves have bizarre plots, and that the first film is a historical piece about a Chinese vampire being constrained by a family, and the sequel is set in the then present day of the, I think, late 1970s, early 1980s. Despite the fact it's a sequel to a film set in a historical period. And then the third film, which is a sequel to the second film, goes back to it being a period piece. It is a very, very confusing franchise. And that's accepting the fact that vampires in Chinese mythology hop.
Yes. Do they only hop when they have the seal on the forehead, or do they just do that always for fun?
So I've been told it's hopping because the motion of a ghost reflects the way that corpses are carried. So you'd basically hoist a corpse over your back, and so the motion of the ghost actually reflects the way they were carried in death, is what I've been
Right.
told. I may be completely wrong about that, but that is what I've been told. And now I'm telling you, so you are told. Are you told, Josh? Yes, you're told.
Yes. Welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to Chinese spiritual monster things. And that's all we have to say from the Podcaster's Guide.
So
to
join us
spiritual
next
Chinese
week for
monster
our
things.
final episode of the year, where we recap this episode, one of the most unusual
And
episodes of
nothing
the
else.
Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Right. No, actual conspiracies and actual podcasts. I suppose before we begin, have you been up to anything interesting academically over the last fortnight?
So mostly I've been marking, because it is the end of the semester here, so my
Sure
students
is.
have been submitting me essay plans, which I've been marking in preparation for the essays which are due in a week's time. So that's exciting. I also wrote a commentary piece for a paper coming out in Psychological Inquiry, which I'm sure we'll talk about next year when the paper is published and my commentary on the paper is published at the same time, and the reply to my commentary is published, although it won't be a reply just to my commentary, it'll be a reply to all of the commentaries which have been solicited for this particular paper, which is an interesting piece because it's on the emotional consequences of belief in conspiracy theories. And I think there's a really interesting project there, but I would like the researchers to also think about the emotional consequences to conspiracy theories that turn out to be true.
Oh, well, something to think about for the new year. But it's not the new year, it's the old year, the dying remnants of 2024.
Yes, the dying embers of 2024, a year that gave us so little. So very little.
Although, as we will talk about in this week's bonus episode, had a strong finish. But anyway.
Possibly
that's all
too
we have to
strong,
talk about.
actually. Possibly just a little bit too strong.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have something a little bit different to talk about today.
Yes, we're going to break copyright law. We're going to break copyright law in a huge way this week, because this week we are listening to someone else's podcast, and we're going to be playing clips of that podcast, and not just clips of that podcast in its entirety as clips. We don't care about what these people think. We don't care about their careers. We only care about what they're saying, because what they're saying is controversial, and we want to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I don't know what they're saying is controversial, but the fact that they're saying it. Now, yes, we have, it has come into our possession, this 8-minute podcast episode. You'll see why we think it's worth talking about, and that it's short enough that we can play the play the whole lot for you. Consequences be damned. So I guess we should just stop beating around the bush and listen to what these, I believe, nameless people have to say.
Well, they'll remain nameless, although we will reveal their identity at the very end of
But in the
listening to the
podcast
episode.
itself, yes.
Yeah. At some point in this podcast, we will reveal their identities and their ill repute backgrounds. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Salubrious backgrounds.
Their backgrounds of insalubrious.
Salubrious isn't really the right word. Anyway,
No.
it's a rum doing, and we're going to get to the bottom of that rum do.
Right. Well, so you've got the clips all queued up.
I have. Let's
Yeah, well,
play
then
a
hit me.
chime, and then we'll roll straight into a podcast on conspiracy theories.
You and your chimes.
So you're out there wondering, do conspiracy theories actually have any value? Well, it just so happened that's exactly what we're diving into today. And we've got a whole bunch of research papers from academics and philosophers who are tackling this very question.
And it feels like these theories are everywhere, right? More relevant than ever.
Totally. It's like every day there's some new theory popping up.
Yeah.
But hold on a sec. Before we go full on down the rabbit hole, maybe we should take a step back. You know how we use the term conspiracy theory? Almost like it automatically means something's way out there.
Right. Like if it's a conspiracy, it can't possibly be true.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Conspiracies, actual secret plots, those happen. Just look at court cases.
Oh, all the time. Organized crime, some companies scheming to collude. Heck, even a couple people plotting to commit a little fraud. Those are all classic conspiracies.
Right.
So, what do you think,
That's how it
John?
starts.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so far so generic, really. Do conspiracy theories have any value?
I find it fascinating that they mention that they've read a whole bunch of research papers by academics and scholars in general. What intrigues me and also frustrates me about this podcast, they mention not a single academic by name throughout the entire recording. So they go, oh, we're referring to literature. They never actually give any citations.
It's a lot of speaking in general terms so far, but I guess a good start to say conspiracies do actually happen. That's encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, it can even be about, as they say, a little bit of fraud. Just a little bit of fraud. Just a little bit of fraud.
Companies scheming to collude. Not quite sure what that means, but it doesn't sound good. It does sound conspiratorial.
It does. Shall we continue?
Let's do that.
And history's packed with them. Take Watergate, for example.
Ooh, good one. Because at first, a lot of folks brushed off the whole break-in thing, the White House connection. They thought it was a little far-fetched.
Okay, so what's the lesson there? If those Watergate folks were supposedly so powerful, how'd they get tripped up?
Ah, see, that's where it gets interesting. It wasn't just one thing, but a whole bunch of factors coming together. You had journalists like Woodward and Bernstein. Those guys were relentless, never let the story go. And of course, there was Deep Throat, a high-ranking government official leaking info, blowing the whistle, so to speak.
So a real-life conspiracy brought down because the truth? Well, it found a way out. Which makes you wonder, for all those conspiracy theories that hang around, is it really that no one's speaking up, or are we just not hearing those voices for whatever reason?
Now you're getting to the heart of it. Some argue a real, genuine conspiracy would never, ever see the light of day. But Watergate and a ton of other examples, they show that's just not how the world works. Information has a way of slipping out sooner or later.
Who is the some? Who are some arguing here? It'd be nice to know who these some people are. I mean, I could name names. Why aren't they naming names? They've done the literature review according to the start of the podcast. Who are they talking about? Who is making these claims?
Yes, again, they like to speak in very general terms, fairly sort of generic statements. An interesting question of, does no one speak up about conspiracy theories, or do we just not hear those voices? I would have said yes to both in some cases.
The other thing which
Certainly
gets
over
me
time.
is they talk about how truth found a way out. There's a weirdly passive way they're talking about the investigation of conspiracy theories, and that Woodward and Bernstein kind of They found out about a conspiracy as opposed to they engaged in investigative journalism to ferret the truth out. So it's almost as if they're going, look, we know conspiracies occur, and we know that some conspiracy theories are true, but they still can't really reject the pejorative implication of the term conspiracy theory. So they talk about the realization of conspiracy theories being true is some kind of passive act, as opposed to, no, in some cases, and many would say in many cases when actual conspiracies are exposed, it requires investigative work, it requires serious cognitive effort.
Yes, I mean, even in their own example, they're not just talking about truth, just finding a way out. It found a way out because people started looking into it, and with an inside source in the form of Deep Throat. But yeah.
Although it's interesting, the Deep Throat thing is kind of fascinating in its own respect, because if you read All the President's Men, one of the things that Deep Throat keeps telling Woodward and Bernstein is, you're getting this wrong. You're not looking in the right location. You're looking at the wrong things. So it's almost as if it's not a symbiotic relationship between Woodward and Bernstein and Deep Throat. It's more Woodward and Bernstein throwing darts at a board, and Deep Throat go, no, that's the wrong target. No, try again. Look, I can't tell you what I know. I can just go, no. Don't look there. Look there.
Okay, well, what's next for our pair of podcasters?
Let's find out.
Okay, but that still doesn't quite explain the appeal, right?
Yeah.
Why do some people find these theories so alluring? Is it all about distrusting authority figures, or is there something more to it? I mean, it seems like these theories often play on real anxieties people have about who's really in control, you know? Like, is it really so out there to think those in charge might be twisting things to benefit themselves?
You've hit on something really important there. It's not just about distrust, but also this very human need we have for explanations, for stories that help us make sense of the world. And that's especially true when we're talking about events that feel huge, scary, life-changing.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Like, say, a global pandemic, it's unsettling, turns everything upside down. It's only natural to want some kind of explanation, some reason, WHY, besides just it happened.
Exactly. And that's where conspiracy theories come in. They offer that sense of order, the idea that someone somewhere is pulling the strings, even if their motives aren't exactly admirable. Plus, a lot of them have this puzzle-like quality that's just inherently intriguing.
Like, you've got to decipher the hidden clues, connect the dots that they are trying to keep hidden.
Precisely.
And once again, they seem to be slipping into a kind of pejorative mode of conspiracy theory here. So they start off by going, well, look, conspiracy theories can be true. But when they're talking about the appeal of conspiracy theories, they seem to be talking about the appeal of not just suspicious seeming conspiracy theories, but deservedly suspicious conspiracy theories, the unwarranted conspiracy theories. Why are people attracted towards those? So it's almost as if they're talking about different things at different points.
Yeah, just in terms of the structure of the podcast, that was quite a jarring segue, really. It's conspiracies, things come up, truth finds a way. That doesn't really explain why they're popular, though. Well, no, because there's nothing to do with why they're popular. It was a bit of a swerve onto this topic, but once they were there, yeah. I mean, I guess this is we sort of moved off of philosophy into psychology, really, for a little bit there, of just why do people like these things called conspiracies. But yes, as you say, they do seem, I mean, although they don't give any examples here, they do seem to be talking more about the fishy ones.
Also, I should point out, our podcast would never swerve in such a way. We'd never go off topic. We are rigid in our topicality. We're so rigid.
Right now.
So rigid right now. Shall we continue?
Yes, please.
But, and this is crucial, while that puzzle-solving aspect can be fun, it can also send us down a slippery slope.
How so?
Well, remember how we were talking about Watergate needing those cracks, those leaks for the truth to surface? Conspiracy theories, especially the ones that linger without any real proof, they require you to distrust not just a single source, but whole systems.
So it's not just the government, but the scientists backing them up, the media reporting on it, the experts who say there's no evidence. It's like everyone's in on it.
It can start to feel that way, and that's what academics call mature conspiracy theories. These are the ones that have been around a while, investigated up and down, but still no solid evidence emerges.
Like the moon landing being fake. People have been saying that for ages.
Exactly. To keep believing those theories, you have to believe not only that the event was staged, but that every single person who's looked into it since then is either part of some massive cover-up or totally clueless.
Talk about a whole lot of distrust. And to be honest, it's kind of insulting to those people, isn't it? Assuming everyone's either lying or a complete fool.
Right.
Now, we finally actually have what I can spot to be an actual reference to the literature here, which is mature, unwarranted conspiracy theories as espoused by Brian L. Keeley in Of Conspiracy Theories as published back in 1999. Apologies to Brian in advance, but it's not that scholars refer to mature conspiracy theories. A subset of scholars do, the philosophers who are interested in discussion of conspiracy theories. But at least we have a reference to the literature, although frustratingly, not actually mentioned who actually coined that term.
No. But yes, it was nice to see a recognisable term from the literature show up. And yeah, again, it still seems quite sort of generic. Just the general statements of, yes, these things can be worrying because of the amount of stuff you have to believe or give up trust in to hold to this, which again are themes that we've seen in articles before, but still stated in fairly general terms.
And once again, we've got this kind of weird view on conspiracy theories being revealed to the public with the information getting out through the cracks. So once again, it's not the investigative efforts of Woodward and Bernstein which is leading towards belief in a warranted conspiracy theory. It's almost as if Woodward and Bernstein simply walked past a conspiracy theory that was cracking open at the time and were just fortuitously there, as opposed to following hunches and engaging in investigation. So even though, once again, they start the piece with a non-pejorative gloss on conspiracy theories, they seem to have a fairly pejorative notion of what a conspiracy theory is, or at least how the truth of conspiracy theories gets out. It's not due to active investigation, it's more like a force of nature.
Okay, well, where do they take it from here then?
Let's see.
And that kind of constant distrust, it can trap you in what researchers call an information silo or epistemic bubble. You end up only seeing information that backs up what you already believe, making it nearly impossible to consider other explanations.
So you're less likely to encounter those inconsistencies in the story, those different viewpoints that might make you reconsider.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be aware of this human tendency, this need for patterns and explanations. Because while it can lead to some pretty amazing discoveries, it can also lead us down some pretty dark and twisted paths.
It's almost like our brains are wired to find those patterns, even when they might not really be there. But here's what I'm struggling with a little. If being too distrusting is a trap, how do you find that balance? Like, how do you stay critical of information without just dismissing everything as a potential conspiracy?
Ugh, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
A million-dollar question indeed.
Interesting use of the term researchers for talking about information silos and epistemic bubbles. I mean, I guess this is research, isn't it? But I tend to think of research as more of a practical thing than a epistemological theoretical thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it is imprecise use of
Hmm.
language here. I don't think these people are philosophers.
Yeah. But yes, no, it's nice to see we're now looking at the other side of things, though. They acknowledge that, yes, being trusting of whatever conspiracy theorists say might be a bad thing, but you also don't want to be too skeptical also.
Yeah, but the evolutionary argument they're also going down here with the HADS, the hyperactive agency detection system. The idea that from an evolutionary perspective, we're kind of hard-coded to spot agency in the environment, which is one of those things. It sounds like a really nice idea, but because it's an idea in evolutionary psychology, and evolutionary psychology is basically all just a set of just so stories, we can go, well, look, it looks like there's a device here, but we can't actually prove there is because there's no way to run historical tests to actually go that this is something which came out of our evolutionary history. And there is a big literature in psychology as to the utility of the HADS as a concept. But that may just be me bouncing off any mention of evolutionary psychology. It gets my hackles up. And you know, Josh, I don't like having my hackles raised. I like to have my hackles smooth.
You're notorious for your hackles, yes. No, that's
true.
Well, let's see if we can smooth them back down again by listening to the next section.
And the answer, well, it's a bit nuanced, like most things worth thinking about. It's about developing a healthy amount of skepticism. Think of it like tasting a glass of wine. You wouldn't just gulp it down in one go, right? You take your time, savor it, think about where it came from, what makes it unique.
So we need to, savor information. I like that. Really break it down, see what it's made of.
Exactly. Ask yourself, who's giving me this information? What are their biases, their motivations? Do they stand to gain anything if I believe what they're saying? And then look at the evidence, or lack thereof. And I don't just mean anecdotes or personal stories. I'm talking about verifiable facts. Does the claim hold water when you really scrutinize it?
So it's more about being discerning, not just accepting something because it sounds good or fits into what we already believe.
I want to point out, not everything is nuanced. There are some views which are not very nuanced at all that I think most people generally agree are good views, such as Nazis are bad. You don't have to have any nuance when you think about Nazis being bad. It's just a brute fact about the world. There's no need to be nuanced about it. So the idea that nuanced views are inherently good is something I think we should be pushing back upon. Because that's the kind of sensible centrism that allows social media sites to go, well, maybe we should have a few Nazis on board just so that we can see what they're thinking.
The wine tasting metaphor was a little bit laboured, but I guess I see their point. You should not mindlessly consume information. You should look into it and see if you can detect notes of peat and earthy tones that tickle the palate on the way.
Citrus
I've never
and
drunk wine in my life.
I mean, that's the kind of things you're meant to look for in wine, I believe. Or maybe that's just Sauvignon Blancs. I mean, I also am not a big wine drinker. I'm more of a beer drinker or a whiskey drinker. And also, it turns out, if you look at the literature on wine tasting, most people can't distinguish between a white and a red if you blindfold them. So actually, wine tasting is a really bad metaphor. Because it turns out people are not very good at discerning wine.
I have heard that sort of double-blind type taste tests show that even experienced wine tasters really can't tell a good one from a bad one a lot of the time. Yeah. Anyway, enough bagging of wine and wine tasters. We're now getting into more of a, what's the term, polemical maybe tone to it. We're actually giving advice on what people should do rather than just talking about these wacky things we call conspiracy theories, which, fair enough, I guess. But another change in direction, but not as sharp a swerve as we saw before.
No. So let's see where they go next when they talk about the radio guy.
Absolutely. And this is especially important when we're dealing with theories that could potentially cause harm.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Because up until now, we've been mostly focused on this idea of distrust, but not so much on what happens when people buy into some of these theories. What are the real-world consequences?
Right, and that's a crucial distinction to make. Because sure, believing the Earth is flat, it's factually wrong, but it's not likely to cause widespread damage. But then you have theories like the one connecting vaccines to autism. Now that one's had a real and honestly pretty devastating impact on public health.
Because people stopped vaccinating their kids based on that misinformation.
Exactly. Cases of preventable diseases popped up because people fell for it. And that's where we really need to be careful. Because sometimes these theories aren't just about people being misled, they're being deliberately spread for malicious reasons. Think of someone like, I don't know, Alex Jones.
Oh yeah, the radio guy. He's been in some hot water over the things he says, hasn't he?
Yeah, you could say that. He was ordered to pay millions in damages for promoting that conspiracy theory that the Sandy Hook school shooting was a hoax. That wasn't just him theorizing, that was straight up spreading harmful lies that caused real pain and suffering to families who had already lost so much.
Alex Jones, the radio guy.
He is the radio guy, and he's been in some hot water. There's no denying that.
It's true. I mean, the radio guy seems like a weird way to describe Alex Jones. I mean, he is syndicated on radio, but his major platform is a streaming platform.
It's online, yes. Yeah. But yes, consequences. I mean, yep, fine. Another thing that has been mentioned in the literature. More, I mean, the negative consequences of conspiracy theorizing to my recollection, has more shown up in your Sunstein and Vermeule style, what do we need to do about this papers, than just talking about them. But it's a topic. It's a topic in conspiracy theories, so I guess it makes sense that they move on to that.
Yeah, and it's a big topic in the social sciences, given that a large chunk of the social psychological literature is on the adverse consequences of belief in conspiracy theories, and some limited discussion as to what we can do to prevent or ameliorate those adverse consequences. So it is kind of frustrating that they gesture towards consequences, and they talk at the beginning of the podcast about how there's all this literature they've read, but they don't really say anything of any particular depth or note.
Interesting to see them moving on from the quite sort of passive wording before of truth finding a way out. Now they're talking about people actively spreading misinformation.
Yes, although once again, that gives them a pejorative mode for conspiracy theories, because that seems to suggest that the conspiracy theories are a species of misinformation, and yet they start out by not making that conflation.
Right, we must be nearly at the end. Have we one or two clips left?
We have one more segment left.
We are at the end. So, okay, let's
steel yourself, Josh, for a conclusion.
Yep.
So it's the difference between genuinely trying to make sense of things, even if you go down some rabbit holes along the way, and purposely pushing falsehoods that have real-world consequences for people.
Exactly. And that's a line we got to be careful not to cross. It's one thing to entertain a theory, to be curious and explore possibilities, but it's a whole other ballgame to spread misinformation, especially when it could put others at risk.
Wow, this has really been eye-opening. So, for our listeners out there, the ones who are super intrigued by conspiracy theories, what's the most important thing they should take away from our deep dive today?
I think it really boils down to this. Curiosity is fantastic, a healthy dose of skepticism is important, but at the end of the day, it's critical thinking that's key. Don't be afraid to question things, to dig deeper, to challenge even your own assumptions. But as you do that, always remember to root your exploration in evidence, empathy, and a genuine desire for truth, wherever that journey might take you.
What a great note to wrap up on. Be curious, be critical, and above all, be kind.
Deep dive. 8-minute deep dive into conspiracy theories. 8 minutes of deep diving. So deep. Such a dive.
Yes, I mean...
But gosh, we're meant to be kind. We're meant to be kind.
Be critical and be kind. Be kindly critical. Yeah, I mean, that last bug is just a bit of wrap up and...
It's almost as if they ran out of things to say. Yes, be curious, think deeply, and be nice to one another. Also, watch Buckaroo Banzai and Adventures Across the Eighth Dimension, but don't read the sequel comic book because it's really, really bad. I mean, it's really, really bad in a sinister, racist, and sexist way. So watch the film because that's all about being kind. Don't read the comic book. It's about being cruel.
Yeah. Glad I haven't. So, that was an 8-minute deep dive into conspiracy theories.
Deep dive.
By a couple of people who spend a good 50% of the time, I would say, kind of filling space a little bit with segues and connective twaddle. I feel fairly confident in saying that these people are fools. They're almost certainly dangerous communists, probably arsonists.
Physically ugly, Josh.
Physically ugly, and quite frankly should be in jail. And I can say that quite safely for reasons that you're now about to explain.
Because these people do not exist. This is a podcast generated from the works of Brian L. Keeley, fed into an LLM, and then produced as a podcast by, and I'm putting here in quotes, the generative artificial intelligence that has produced such a marvelous 8-minute deep dive based upon Brian's work.
Was it all of Brian's work?
He said he said he put his work in. I'm assuming it's most of his work, if not all of his work. And that is what an AI has been able to glean from his work, that 8 minutes of twaddle.
Yes, I mean, where there was substantive stuff about conspiracy theories, I don't think anything like contradicted anything Brian would have said. Although, again, it was all very general.
It's all kind of consistent in a really vague way. So nothing they say would be something that you might go, Brian would go, oh, he would pale at that claim being made based upon his work. But at the same time, nothing they say is a particularly deep or informative thing. And the one thing where they start getting into his work, the idea of mature, unwarranted conspiracy theories, they don't even really talk about the problems that Brian discusses about diagnosing whether a conspiracy theory really is mature or not. They just mention that there are some conspiracy theories which have persisted in discourse for a period of time, and that makes them mature and suspicious. But there's an entire discussion in Brian's work about, are they really mature? What kind of evidence would be put forward? You might expect some things that look mature to not turn out to be mature upon investigation, because evidence might appear at a later point, because conspirators are good at hiding what they do, according to at least some descriptions of particular conspiracy theories. So yeah, nothing contradicts Brian per se, but nothing seems particularly informative either. I would be annoyed at that kind of podcast being produced as a gloss on my work, for the sheer fact that it just seems to be trying to be all things to all people without ever making any definite claims.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know more about the sort of the process and the prompts that the LLM was given to make that. Was it simply, make a short podcast that sums everything up, or was it just here's everything, go, and 8 minutes was the best it could do? I don't know.
Well, hopefully later this week I'll be talking with Brian to find out more about that particular process. I was hoping to actually get in contact with him before we record this podcast, but it's finals week in the US, and then he's going to be traveling, so he was unable to book a time with me before deadlines were due in Claremont and travel began. So hopefully later this week, I can find out exactly what the process was and what he thinks of the podcast that was generated from his work.
So, I mean, this now leads into the section of this episode where we basically spend, I don't know, what do you reckon, a good 20 minutes, maybe half an hour slagging off AI.
I could do hours, Josh. Absolute hours.
Yes. No, neither of us are particularly fond of the large language models.
I refuse to use it. I have not used an LLM, and I do not want to use an LLM. I don't like the fact that I know academics who are using LLMs to generate drafts of papers or summaries of views in order to then draft papers. I'm really, really not keen on the idea of people going, oh, bored of writing, I'm going to let an AI do it instead.
Yeah. Someone is really going for it on the street outside my house.
It's an AI trying to escape, maybe. George. It's heard what's going on. It's trying to escape.
I've had a very brief play with ChatGPT just to see what all the fuss was about, and I can certainly see why they grab people's attention. The amount that they can come up with based off of a very small prompt is impressive. It's just usually quite like one of the things I did was say, give me an introduction for a podcast called The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, and it came up with something that was all perfectly grammatical and sounded like a thing a human being would say, but also very generic and lacking in any sort of real substance, which is a lot of the problem, I think, with what we just listened to. I think I mentioned this on Blue Sky the other week. You and I, you've seen Evil Speak, haven't you? The Clint Howard summons demonic pigs movie.
No, I don't think I have.
No, it's one I watched a while ago. It's 1981. Clint Howard, back when he was young and not as frankly funny looking as he is today. He plays a bullied cadet at a military academy who finds like this magical grimoire of some evil wizard and summons demonic pigs to exact revenge on his tormentors. But the important thing is, for some reason, like they had access to a computer lab or something, and so his character goes into the computer lab at his military academy and uses a computer to translate this magical book and summon the devil. And it has bits of like him typing into a command line, what are the ingredients for a black mass? And the computer immediately telling him how to perform a black mass. And I remember watching that at the time. This would have been 10 years ago or something, long before AI started showing up in its current form, and thinking, look at this film from 1981 where people honestly thought computers were just magic, didn't they? They thought you could just type stuff into a command line and it just knew everything. Those poor credulous fools. And then I
mean,
look at
that's the problem. That's one of the only problems in John Carpenter's The Thing, is the computer program where they type in how long will it take for the thing to infect everyone, and it gives an instantaneous answer. Okay, so I mean, sorry, did you write a program in your spare time before the thing even arrived at your Arctic station, trying to work out a simulation method to work out if a virus or something occurs, how long would it take to infect the entire planet? Because it just seems that they're going, well, I mean, computers can do anything. It is one of the only things about the thing which just never looked right and still looks stupid to this day.
Yes, but I mean, I watched these old. I probably should have actually talked about War Games, because that's a film people have actually all seen, and it's the same phenomenon. But anyway,
do you want to play a game?
To me, yeah. People used to think, oh, computers are just magical boxes that can do anything, and then I see how they look at the likes of aliens these days and think, oh, no, actually, people do kind of think computers are just magical boxes that you can put anything in. I guess. I mean, I guess the only reason we're probably speaking to the converted if you're listening to this podcast, but just in case, I think the only thing we really need to emphasize is that things like ChatGPT are not search engines. If you ask one a question, it'll give you an answer. It'll give you a very convincing sounding answer, but it did so by statistically predicting what a person might say to that question, not by actually looking up the answer in any sort of a database or repository of knowledge.
Yeah, anyway, if you know anything about how LLMs work and the way that it converts a sentence into tokens and then does a probabilistic matching of what token normally comes before and after that token, it explains why you get very generic results, because it is basically telling you this is what an average of every user, or at least every part of the lexicon, thinks about this. And it also explains why it has troubles working out how many R's there are in strawberry, because it treats the double R token as being the same thing, which is why it then miscounts the number of letters in a word, a thing which a very simple program can do, and yet a very expensive to run, both with power and environmental cost, LLM can't do. We're replacing programs that work with LLMs that don't do the same job well. And apparently that's how we're meant to do things now.
Yes. Yeah. No, so I mean, LLMs have a place. The thing that they seem to be best. Yeah, the thing that they seem to be best for is filler, basically. I know lots of people who sort of use them for form letters and stuff. And so it seems like if you just want content to fill space and you're not too... that sounds more or less right. That seems to be what they're good for, and that I think shows in things like this podcast that is very that has just a lot of generic filler all the way through that doesn't end up saying an awful lot in many places.
Yeah, it's all filler, no Ben Stiller.
I was, though, quite impressed by the state of text-to-speech.
Actually, so that is the one thing which I was impressed by, right down to the fact that there's the drawing in of breath, and also in some cases quite lengthy pauses, and that intrigued me, because when I'm editing the podcast, I'm eradicating the drawing in of breath, and I'm eradicating the long pauses. When the AI is creating the podcast, it's putting that stuff in.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to. It's a bit of a judgment call for me sometimes on whether I leave in a breath or a pause, because sometimes it does indicate that we have thought for a second about what we're saying, which does colour how you perceive it. But I've used text-to-speech stuff in the past, and they have been doing the drawing of breath thing for a while. Most of the ones I've used have been a little bit rubbish, though, which I always thought it was weird, actually, that you'd listen to this generated speech and it was clever enough to put in breaths where a person would put a breath, and often clever enough to put in a longer breath when it knows there's a longer section of speech coming up, and yet the speech that it then spits out always sounds a little bit stilted and weird. Although, I don't know, in my day job, I'm actually using some text-to-speech stuff at the moment, and when we started using it, I sort of said, yeah, I get that we're doing it and I get why we're doing it. It's nails on a chalkboard to me. It has a real uncanny valley feel to me. I can hear all the ways that it's not quite how a person speaks, although most of the people I've said this to have said, really? I thought it sounded great. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too picky. Actually, in terms of this one, I think if you'd given it to me not telling me it was generated from an LLM, I might have been suspicious just by the sort of the nature of the content and how it does sound. It does have that generic AI-produced sound, but I don't think I would have pegged it. But knowing in advance, listening to it, there were just a couple of bits where I was like, okay, that was a little bit off. There were pauses in the wrong place or a lack of pauses where you'd expect them just once or twice, but I wouldn't have spotted them otherwise, I don't think.
Yeah, although I was thinking about that earlier today because some of those weird pauses or cases where they take a swerve also could be artifacts in a real podcast from bad editing. So
Possibly.
someone has edited a section out because someone says something that they take to be incorrect. They say something salacious. Someone stumbles over some words. There's some background noise you can't get rid of, so you cut it out. And so suddenly the conversation goes from X to Z without going through Y. And someone is either editing pauses out, or because they've edited some other section in, they've put an extra long pause in by accident. These are things which could be editing mistakes. So, yeah, there were certain points where a character would react with what or really, which sounded weird, but at the same time also could have been a let's do that take again, and they've chosen a take which sounds better in the long run, but also is disconnected from the thing that was last said.
And I thought it did a good job of having the two presenters sort of bouncing off each other as well. It was obviously, it wasn't just something had been fed a single script and was reading through it. It obviously had, the one person speaking and the other person speaking, and then sticking them together so there could be slight overlaps when they would be discussing something and things like that. So.
That being said, they never seem to have any
blah.
particular character. So it sounded like two people having a conversation, but it didn't sound like two distinct characters having a conversation. So a more convincing way of doing it would have been having, say, the skeptic and the conspiracy theorist having that conversation, as opposed to two people who are like-minded having that conversation, which now makes me wonder, what do we sound like? I mean, we know each other's voices, but listeners might go, they basically just sound the same. You could just replace them both with an AI.
Possibly. I don't know. For all you know, we already have.
It's true. That would be the ultimate reveal if then we pull the curtain back and then Josh and Em start talking about the AI-generated podcast response to an AI podcast. And actually, we're the AI at this point. Are we the AI, Josh? Are we the AI?
I think we're just the I, hopefully. I don't know.
Or just the A. We're just the A.
Maybe. Okay, that's enough slagging off LLMs. But an interesting look at the sorts of things an interesting look at what an LLM can make of philosophy, I guess. And I think you hit the nail on there. Actually, it's a lack of personality. I think that's the real thing that shows through in most AI-produced content.
Yes, and I see that with students who want to use LLMs to generate essays. The thing about philosophy is we expect people to stake a position. The thing about LLM content at this stage, and I'm aware this is a moving target here, because LLMs, and I hate to say this because I'm putting it in quote marks, seem to be getting better, although there's also a big question as to whether they've hit a brick wall now with respect to their being able to get any better than they are. But LLMs are very bad at doing philosophy because they kind of do a both sides, let's be nuanced about this. as opposed to going, look, this position is superior to that position, and here's why. And LLM will go, well, some people think this position is good, and some people will think that position is good, which is a view that first-year students often want to engage in, and philosophers try to train them out of. No, tell me what you think. Which position do you agree with? Why do you agree with it? Why is the other position not as good? And that podcast was a great case of going, well, some people think that conspiracy theories can be true, but then automatically lapsing into, but of course they're also bad. There was a ambivalence there, which means it's bad philosophy, which is kind of ironic given it's based upon a corpus of philosophical texts.
And to give credit to Brian, I would say good philosophy.
Oh yeah. Oh, no. Nothing. There's nothing wrong about the input.
No.
There's a lot wrong about the output.
Yes. Right. So I think that'll do for now. But we're going to end this episode, but we have more recording to do. We've got a bonus episode, which we'll do, where we're going to talk. We're going to have a bit of a roundup of. I was going to say roundup of the year, but it's not. It's a roundup of the last 2 weeks, really. It's just that a whole lot seems to have happened of significance at the very end of 2024, and then we're going to go and record another episode because I don't know, because I'm going to be on holiday at some point. You're coming back here to New Zealand at some point. Recording's going to be a little bit iffy, but if we do another short end of year episode right now, then we'll have another episode to give to you in a week's time or something, and it all works out marvelously.
Yeah, and that means the bonus episodes are going to be slightly weird, and that probably the bonus episode we're going to record now will actually be the bonus episode for the last 2 week summary, because it would make more sense to have the bonus episode for this week be Brian talking about the LLM stuff, which means the bonus episode might already be out of date by the time it goes live. That's the kind of living on the edge that we AIs and the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy like to engage in.
Yes, we'll just have to see how things go. So you will be getting content, just not exactly certain what that content will be and what order it will appear in.
Yeah, and there might even be more content than that, as people who are listening to the bonus episode are about to find out.
Yes, but that's enough waffling and disclaimers for now. We're not an LLM, as far as you know. So I think we should just call this particular episode to a close and go and record some other ones. So I'm going to do the traditional signing off of saying goodbye.
Session terminated. The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy stars Josh Addison and myself, Associate Professor MRX Dentith. Our show's producers are Tom and Philip, plus another mysterious anonymous donor. You can contact Josh and myself at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com, and please do consider joining our Patreon. And remember, Soylent Green is Meeples.